Phil Savage, Executive Director for the Reese's Senior Bowl, also the color analyst for Tide Sports. I mean, good gracious, man. This guy, I think he wears more hats than I do. Hey, and now that's been added to it lately. Listen, I always wanted to be able to say I know personally big-time authors, and that is Phil Savage. Phil, welcome into the game. How you doing today?
I'm good, Martin. I hope you're doing well, man. July the 5th, that means that football is just around the corner because, as you know, after the 4th of July ends, everyone's attention really does start to turn toward the season.
Yeah, hey, Coach, you and I have been around long enough that we've seen it go from a semi-annual to three-quarters to year-round sporting event, as you said, and hard to believe we're, 5 days away from media days, and Alabama look like they're going to be the prohibited favorite to win it all. Coach, I want to talk with you a little bit about kind of what you've been up to and this book you have. But before I do that, there's the 90th anniversary of Legion Field. And I'm asking our listeners kind of what's their favorite memory. Do you have a favorite memory from your days back walking the sideline, being a part of Alabama as a coach and a grad assistant there?
You know, Martin, those were the special days when Alabama played in Legion Field because most of the, quote, big games, the Iron Bowl, the rivalry against Tennessee, the national opponents that would come in, whether it was USC or someone else, those games were always in Birmingham at Legion Field, the football capital of the South. But I'll quickly share with you my favorite memory of Legion Field was actually the first time I was there, and it's in the book, 4th and Goal Every Day. And Murphy High School is where my father went to school down here in Mobile, and then I went there as well. But in the 70s, in the mid-70s, they made it to the state championship game at Legion Field against Mountain Brook. And, of course, Mountain Brook was led by Major Ogilvy. He rushed for over 300 yards that night.
Ooh.
And Mountain Brook beat Murphy 52-26. But I remember walking into Legion Field, and those optic yellow goalposts just grabbed my eye because I'd never seen anything like that before. And from that moment on, it just sort of bit me that was representative of big-time football, whether it was college or the NFL. And so pretty much every stadium now, if you notice, in the NFL or at a major school, those goalposts are just a bright yellow, and that just shows that you're at a little different level than, say, middle school or high school or what have you. And that was really a moment in time that grabbed me as far as wanting to be part of the game, you know, as a grown-up.
Yeah, and Coach, you've done a lot of things. I tried to call you Phil, but you're going to end up being Coach the whole time, so just know that. You and I spent some great times here at Alabama winning the championship, and then you went on and you've done some big things at the NFL level, and now you're back at the Senior Bowl, and I want to talk to you about that at the end of the conversation. But this book has me and others intrigued. By the way, I just want you to know you stole my title, okay? 4th and Goal Every Day is a fullback title. You know that, right? But, Coach,
well, you can relate to what it means because you think about that moment in a game, 4th and Goal. I mean, you go back to the Sugar Bowl with Barry Krause over the top, stopping Mike Gooman when Alabama won the national championship in the 70s, and you spin it forward to what really goes on within the program now. And I've said many times that I don't necessarily think Alabama wins the games on Saturday. They win the game the other 350 days out of the year.
Yeah.
Because every person within, as Coach Saban calls it, the organization has a role to play, a responsibility to uphold the crimson and white and Alabama football. So that's really where the title comes from. And you know what it's like when you make it, the exhilaration of scoring the touchdown, and then, of course, if you don't make it, the agony of failing to convert when you're down there in the scoring territory.
Yeah, Coach, and that is also evident of just how intense you have to be if you're going to maintain the way they have, because either you get it or you don't. If you don't, the game flips the other way. If you get it, you continue to move on, and so it keeps you on edge every day, and that's what you're trying to communicate, is that this program isn't winning championships just on those few Saturdays we get to see them. A couple things that we learned from the book. AL.com wrote an article, and I wanted to ask you about those. The first thing they said is that you provide a detailed scouting report prior to every game. How did that come about, Coach, in terms of you being almost an extension, another version of how Saban utilizes all of those who are connected with the Alabama program?
Yeah, let me say that the article that came out a couple weeks ago, honestly, I thought that the writer missed the point of the book with some of the things that he pulled from it. And, I'm not sure I used the word detailed scouting report. I think I used Cliff Notes version of a scouting report because, look,
Coach Savage, we're in the Twitter world. We're in the Twitter world, so if you give more than 30 characters,
a ton of analysts that do hours upon hours of work. But what in a short story, before the Virginia Tech game in 2009, this is going to be my first attempt to be a color analyst. So I had reached out to a number of my friends, guys like Todd Blackledge and Rich Gannon, and some of these guys have done it for a long time. They said, look, preparation is really the key. So I spent the summer getting ready for Virginia Tech and Florida International and those first few opponents. And so about 10 days before that first game, Coach Saban's assistant is a lady named Linda Leone. She was my assistant when I was the Browns GM, and she subsequently came to Alabama in 2009 and has been there ever since. So I just sent an email to her and said, hey, here's some cliff notes of if Nick would be interested in it. It's, bathroom reading, I think, is the way I termed it. And so that was that. Didn't think anything of it. We go to Atlanta. The Tide wins. The next day, my wife and I are in. We flew to New York. We were going to spend a couple of days up there. And on Monday morning, all of a sudden, I'm getting these calls from Linda saying, hey, where's that report? I'm like, what report? She said, on the FIU. And I'm like, I didn't know I was going to have to be doing this every week. And so for 111 games in a row now, we've done that on Sunday night or Monday mornings. And, again, it's just a sort of an overview of these upcoming opponents. And I think, quite honestly, because of the success that the team has enjoyed, it's probably become a little bit more of a, kind of a good luck charm or some of that way of thinking. Superstition, I guess, in terms of trying to make sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to do for the Tide to win.
Speaking with Phil Savage, Executive Director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, also author of the new book, 4th and Goal Every Day. Coach, when you look at Coach Saban, there's a lot of things that I think make him special. But when a guy is at his level, have you ever seen anyone who reaches that level of execution where they're the source for so many people, yet he continually brings and pulls from not just people like you, but people from his past? I saw where it talked about he pulled from even the way Tom Landry and those guys scouted up to this very day, how he'll bring in coaches from all over the country. Is that what makes Nick Saban so good at what he and able to almost reinvent himself year to year?
Yeah, I think when you're a leader, you always have to continue learning, and he never takes anything for granted from game to game, from season to season. And you go back to 2009, the first national championship team under Nick Saban, up to this last season, the 2016 team. And I mean, yes, some of the core philosophies have stayed the same, but they've adjusted in a big way in terms of their style of play, both on offense and defense. And so, he tries to stay a step ahead of the curve. He doesn't want to be trying to do something yesterday and win tomorrow, because he knows that that's not going to work. And I think the fact that he's had this kind of energy, which is, to me, that's the thing that separates him from anybody else, is he brings such an energy not only to the practice field and certainly game day, but the off season in terms of the recruiting. And a lot of head coaches just sign off on recruits. They trust their assistants, or they trust the services, or what have you. Nick Saban's evaluating those players. He wants to put his eyeballs on those prospects when they come to the summer camp in June. And so not a lot of people can maintain that level of focus and that level of energy. He's been able to do it in, one of the pressure cookers of all of college football when you talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Coach, first of all, before I forget, when is the book going to be officially released? I know they can go to Amazon.com and order it, but I want to make sure, when is the actual release date?
Yeah, it'll be on shelves, Martin, on August the 29th, but as you pointed out, it is available for pre-order, and your listeners can save about $8 or $9 at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, any of the online outlets. They all have it, and it is available now for purchase, but it won't be available hands-on until August 29th.
Yeah, and I saw the pre-order price was significantly discounted. So if you have plans to get this book, because you're going to get an inside scoop, you're not going to see it everywhere. He talks about some inside details on the Lane Kiffin blow up. He talks a little bit about the Coker Bateman situation with the mysterious start by Cooper Bateman. But one of the other things you talked about, and this is kind of that inside football stuff that kind of piqued my interest, Coach, on one of those scouting reports, you picked up that Texas A&M tipped off their players. Now, I had a game in high school where I found that on a guy that we played against. If he was going right with the run, he put his right foot forward, and vice versa. If he was going left, if he was going right, he put his left foot back. And so what would happen is I just knew where he was going. The problem is if you didn't tackle him at the line, he scored. We tackled him for a loss or at the line all but 3 plays. He had a 93-yarder, a 99-yarder, and like an 80-yarder. So we still lost, Coach, but we shut him down the other, 65 plays. When you were watching film and saw that, Coach, first of all, I guess my first question is, how do your team get to that point where no one else has picked up on that from their coaching staff in terms of something so blatant, and what do you use to find little cues like that?
Yeah, again, I think that article sort of twisted that story a bit, because this was probably the most blatant example last year of where a team, linemen or different people on offense were tipping their plays as to run or pass. And honestly, I would not have included the story had it not been so publicly reported on. Ryan Anderson went on the SEC network and talked about it, and Reuben Foster had 12 tackles that day, and he talked about, the stances of the offensive tackles for Texas A&M. And honestly, I think a lot of people across the SEC probably recognize that, but it was included in the story because those are sort of the subtle, and there's other examples, but those are some of the subtleties that go into film evaluation. People always say, well, I watched tape. Well, you don't watch it like a movie. You study it, you evaluate it, and Alabama does as good or better job of anybody in the country in terms of trying to read keys and read things from stances that could trigger certain reactions from their defense. And that was really the point of that story. It certainly was nothing that I discovered on my own. It was readily obvious if you had any sort of eye at all that you would have picked up on that. But nevertheless, those are the kinds of things. And to me, that's why you take the 5-star recruiting, the 5-star player development, and then the 5-star intel, getting prepared for a game. And that's why, Martin, that other than 3 regular season games since 2008, think about that. In the last 9 years, there have only been 3 regular season games that Alabama has not been in the national picture. In other words, every game they've played, other than 3, has really mattered.
Wow.
Not only in the SEC, but on a national scale. There's no other program in the country that can even come close to that. All of these other programs have taken a step back, dipped for a year or two, then come back, whether it's been Oklahoma, Florida State, Ohio State, Auburn. It doesn't matter. They've all had some ups and downs, and yet Alabama, for 9 years in a row, you throw a couple plays in that could have gone the other way, and yes, they've played for 5 national titles. They could have played for 6 or perhaps even 7 in the last 8 years since I've been doing the color, and that's just an amazing feat.
It absolutely is, Coach, when you look at just the consistency. And so when you look at the book that you wrote, a lot of people were asking when it first came out, oh, my goodness, does Saban know that he's putting this information in there? Is Saban gonna fire him? I mean, I'm just telling you what was kind of going on out there when the stories came out. We have these things, and it sounds like the guy didn't get the whole gist of what 4th and goal every day really, really means. Coach, just not the details of the stories, but for us out there that can't wait to get the book, what's 1 or 2 other things you included in the book? And then tell us the heart behind why you decided to write this. And we know Saban has given his blessings because he's actually an official part of the book.
Well, first thing right off the top is that, you know, the background of growing up here in the state during the 1970s when Alabama was seemingly in title contention every single year under Coach Bryant, to take that perspective, spin it forward to the early 1990s when, you know, I was fortunate to be part of the coaching staff with the Cleveland Browns. Our head coach was Bill Belichick. Our defensive coordinator was Nick Saban. I was the defensive assistant. And, I mean, Martin, in 1991, when I met Nick Saban and Bill Belichick basically 5 minutes apart, there's no way that anyone could have known that you just shook hands with the 2 greatest coaches of this generation.
No way.
2 guys that are going to be on the Mount Rushmore in their respective leagues, whether it's the NFL or the college ranks. And so a lot of what was discussed and formulated and the philosophies developed, a lot of that took place in Berea, Ohio in the early 1990s. And then we've seen all of this come to life essentially in New England with the Patriots and in Tuscaloosa with the Crimson Tide. And, you know, when I was approached about doing the book, I said, man, you know, I agree that no one could bring the kind of perspective of having the background of growing up in the state to then being sort of at ground zero of the birth of this Belichick-Saban dynasty, if you want to call it that, and then to be able to come back in these last 8 years, do the color for Alabama, and see it really come to life. And so I think that's why it'll be a fascinating read for people, whether you're an Alabama fan or football fan in general. I think you'll learn a lot. I've gotten a ton of text messages from people that have read the book. And listen, the article that came out on AL.com a couple weeks ago was a 600-word article on an 80,000-word book. And granted, we appreciate the publicity, but it was not close to an accurate depiction of the totality and the overall picture of the book, because in my estimation, it elevates and celebrates Alabama football in a big way, in a way that will shed just extreme positive light on the program and what Nick Saban and his staff have accomplished over these last 9 years.
All right, what's 1 or 2 pieces of juice now? I mean, you got the listeners on edge right now. They're at Amazon.com, Books Me. They're looking right now, going, okay, should I get it? What's 1 or 2? You don't give us the detail because we want to read the book. But in those other 79,400 words, what else did Coach Savage give us an insight on?
Well, first of all, a lot of the way that Bama recruits in terms of their evaluation, at least in my opinion, a lot of it came from the Dallas Cowboys back in the early 1960s when Tex Schramm and Gil Brandt and Tom Landry, they were really the first program to begin using computers and trying to create prototypes as to what would be the ideal height, weight, and speeds to play certain positions. Alabama recruits to those standards to this day, and they don't deviate from that very often. So the whole background of that and how it evolved to where it is today is included. And then, of course, as you go down through it, when Nick Saban was hired at Alabama, I was the GM of the Browns at that time. Ozzie Newsome was the GM of the Ravens. Of course, Ozzie and I had worked together for 14 years. We're good friends to this day. And we ended up on the phone together. I said, Ozzie, this is either going to be the quickest divorce in the history of college football or the grandest marriage that we've ever seen. And it has absolutely turned into the perfect marriage between Nick Saban and the University of Alabama. And so I detail some of the reasons of why that is. And, of course, the title includes the word relentless, but, his relentless nature in trying to reach a certain standard, and, of course, the relentless nature of the fans, the alums, and the media in this state in terms of wanting Alabama to essentially win every game. And he's almost delivered that over this last decade.
Speaking with Coach Phil Savage, Executive Director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. Coach, growing up in Mobile, playing at Murphy, being a part of Murphy, being a part of the state, and now have an opportunity to lead the Senior Bowl, which to me is like Alabama is to D1 college football programs, the Senior Bowl is to all of the all-star games, postseason games for seniors. You made some recent changes and improvements. Tell us what's the latest for the Reese's Senior Bowl on the horizon, and maybe some of the guys that we may not know about that you're looking to potentially bring down this year.
Yeah, Martin, of course, I was going to the Senior Bowl when I was 5 or 6 years old, getting autographs and seeing Bum Phillips and Chuck Noll and Don Coryell and coaches like that back in the 70s walk along the sidelines as they evaluated players. And then, it seems like only a few years passed, and then I was in Mobile as a GM trying to find players to actually draft for a team. And so to be able to bring that kind of perspective from A to Z as the executive director, I think we've, done some remarkable things down here. We consider the Senior Bowl to be one of Alabama's treasures on the football landscape. I mean, it is the most unique week in all of football because it's where the college and professional worlds collide in downtown Mobile. And so, we've got our title sponsorship with Reese's, the candy company out of Hershey, Pennsylvania. We have, we're in good standing with the NFL Network and ESPN, Sirius XM Radio. Adidas provides all of our uniforms and apparel. So, a lot of times people in other parts of the state ask about, the Senior Bowl standing in Mobile, and, it's as solid as it's ever been. Of course, this next year will be the 69th annual game. But, Alabama's had the most players in the game since I got here, 22. They've certainly had the most games and most players in the game over the history of the contest. Auburn is next with 16. I think LSU's next with 14. So Bama, Auburn, LSU, all of the Southeastern Conference schools usually have great representation in the game. And when you start talking about quarterbacks, this next year I was just down at the Manning Academy a week or so ago, and guys like Josh Allen from Wyoming, Luke Falk from Washington State, Mason Rudolph from Oklahoma State, Baker Mayfield from Oklahoma. Those are all quarterbacks that we'll be eyeballing this fall.
All right. Hey, Coach, well, I had an opportunity to play in that game. Coach, if I get a chance, I want to just rub up against you, get a little bit, see if I can get some of that charmed life, football life that you've had an opportunity to live, being associated with Belichick and Ozzie and Saban and Stallings and Alabama and now the Senior Bowl. And I'm telling you, really looking forward to this book. Once again, tell our listeners how they can get a pre-copy of it and what else you got going on, Coach.
Well, I appreciate it, Martin. Yeah, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, all of the retailers that are online have the book. You can save probably $8 or $9 if you order it now. It will be available August the 29th, and I think fans are really going to enjoy the story. And, you know, as I said earlier, I've gotten texts from Eli Gold to Reese Davis to people, you know, from few and far between saying how much they enjoyed the book, and they've just shaking their head with the volume of info in there that really shares some insight into why Alabama's been so successful and really, as I said earlier, celebrates the success of the Tide.